The greatest enemy you will ever face is not the one who insults you, not the one who betrays you, nor the one who stands against you in open conflict. The greatest enemy is the one that lives within, the shadow, the unacknowledged side of your psyche that contains everything you repress, deny, and fear to confront. And unless you face it, unless you bring it into the light of your awareness, it will slowly, silently, and inevitably destroy you. The shadow is not a myth. It is the psychological reality that every human being carries. It is made of repressed anger, unspoken desires, forbidden thoughts, and everything society told you was unacceptable. You bury it deep, believing that by hiding it, you can be free of it. But what you bury does not die. It grows stronger in the darkness, waiting for moments of weakness to erupt. It comes out as irrational anger, as envy, as sabotage of your own happiness, as addictions, as projections onto others. To ignore your shadow is to be controlled by it unconsciously. To face it is terrifying, but it is the only way to become whole. For the truth is this: you cannot call yourself free until you have looked at the darkest part of your soul and said, "This too is me." Only then does the shadow lose its destructive power and become instead a source of wisdom, energy, and integration. The shadow, as I have called it, is not merely a poetic metaphor or a symbolic abstraction. It is a living, breathing reality within the psyche. It is composed of those parts of ourselves we have rejected, denied, or buried because they did not fit the image of who we wished to be or who society allowed us to become. From early childhood, we are trained to adopt masks: the obedient child, the good student, the polite citizen. And in the process of wearing these masks, everything that does not align with them is cast aside into the unconscious. This becomes the shadow, the anger you were told never to express, the ambitions you were told were too arrogant, the desires you were taught to feel ashamed of, the pain you were forced to conceal because no one wanted to hear it. All of it gathers like a dark reservoir beneath the surface of the conscious mind. But the shadow is not only made of what is bad, it is also made of what is vital, creative, and necessary for your wholeness. A man who has repressed his capacity for tenderness because he was told it was weak may find his shadow brimming with sensitivity and compassion. A woman who has repressed her capacity for strength because she was told it was unfeminine may find her shadow filled with untapped courage and assertiveness. Thus, the shadow is not the enemy. It is a mirror, reflecting back the neglected sides of yourself. And until you look into that mirror, you will never see the full truth of who you are. The danger of the shadow lies in its unconsciousness. Whatever you do not acknowledge in yourself does not disappear. It merely escapes your control. You may say, "I am not jealous," but jealousy burns quietly within you, shaping your relationships in subtle ways. You may say, "I am not angry," but anger leaks out in sarcasm, resentment, and passive aggression. You may say, "I am not afraid," but fear grips your choices, making you small, timid, unwilling to risk the fullness of life. The shadow is always active, always influencing you, whether you admit it or not. This is why so many lives are marked by sabotage. You do not fail because the world is against you, but because the shadow within you works silently to undo your efforts. You do not lash out at a loved one because you truly hate them, but because the repressed rage within you has found an outlet. You do not despise others because they are truly despicable, but because you are projecting onto them the qualities you cannot admit exist within yourself. In this way, the shadow turns your own unacknowledged traits into enemies, both in the outer world and within your own heart. To understand the shadow is to recognize that you are not simply a being of light. You are a whole, and wholeness includes darkness. It is only when you dare to step into this darkness, when you stop denying its existence, that you can begin to reclaim the energy and wisdom that lies hidden within. Until then, the shadow remains an unseen master, guiding your hand, whispering in your mind, and shaping your destiny without your consent. And this is why the first step toward freedom, The first step toward true individuality begins with the courage to say, "Yes, the shadow is mine." When you turn away from your shadow, you are not escaping it. You are only driving it deeper into the unconscious, where it grows in strength and subtlety. The unconscious does not remain idle. It is not a passive container, but an active force. And what is repressed eventually finds its way back into the world. Jung called this process projection. The qualities you cannot admit in yourself will appear to you in others, and you will react with disproportionate intensity because you are, in truth, confronting your own denied aspects. The man who cannot admit his own weakness will despise the weakness he perceives in others. The woman who cannot face her own aggression will be quick to call others cruel. We see in the outer world a distorted reflection of what lies hidden within, and because we are blind to this origin, we are convinced that the problem lies out there, with them, never with us. This is the tragic irony of the unintegrated shadow. It becomes the architect of conflict. Nations, families, friendships, marriages are torn apart, not because of external differences, but because individuals project their hidden shadows onto one another, turning partners into enemies, strangers into threats, and neighbors into demons. When two people both deny their shadows, they enter into a battle that has nothing to do with reality, but everything to do with their unconscious selves. Each sees in the other what they refuse to face in themselves, and so they fight not against the other, but against their own reflection. On the personal level, projection leads to cycles of blame and victimhood. Instead of owning our inner rage, we insist that others are the cause of our misery. Instead of acknowledging our own envy, we accuse the world of being unfair. Instead of admitting our fear, we construct elaborate narratives in which we are forever being oppressed by external forces. The more we project, the further we drift from self-knowledge, and the more powerless we become over our own lives. Because what you project cannot be integrated. It remains outside of you, foreign, hostile, and untouchable. This is why ignoring the shadow is so destructive. It ensures that the qualities you cannot accept will never be transformed. They will continue to appear in your life as enemies, accidents, and crises. A person who refuses to admit their capacity for cruelty may one day commit a destructive act they never thought themselves capable of. A person who refuses to admit their vulnerability may collapse under the very weakness they denied. In every case, the shadow eventually breaks through, and when it does so with violence, because it has been ignored for too long. To live in ignorance of the shadow is to live in constant conflict with the world, for the world will become a mirror of everything you cannot accept in yourself. This is why facing the shadow is not optional. It is the only path toward authenticity. The shadow you ignore does not only appear in your perception of others, it infiltrates your choices, your relationships, and your destiny. When hidden forces drive your life, you are not living consciously, you are being lived by unconscious patterns. Jung warned that what remains unconscious appears in our lives as fate, and this is why people repeat the same destructive cycles without ever understanding why. The man who denies his own greed finds himself endlessly entangled with exploiters. The woman who denies her need for control continually encounters people who dominate her. These repetitions are not accidents. They are the shadow orchestrating life from the depths, pushing unresolved conflicts into the world so that you are forced to face them. Yet, most remain blind to this, preferring to call it bad luck or the cruelty of others rather than acknowledging the hidden truth within. The shadow operates like an invisible script. It dictates the roles you play without your awareness. You think you are choosing freely, but in reality, your unconscious is choosing for you. This is why people fall into the same toxic relationships, return to the same self-sabotaging behaviors, and chase the same illusions that never satisfy them. They are being guided not by conscious will, but by what they refuse to acknowledge in themselves. The shadow thrives in this blindness, feeding on denial, growing more powerful each time you avoid responsibility for your inner world. But the cost of ignoring the shadow is not just personal. It robs you of true individuality. If you are always at the mercy of unconscious drives, then you are never truly yourself. You are merely a collection of unexamined impulses, shaped by forces you cannot control. Freedom begins only when you confront these hidden forces, when you recognize the shadow for what it is, not a curse to be feared, but a part of your totality that demands to be integrated. Until you face it, you are condemned to act out a life that does not belong to you. The danger is that many people mistake avoidance for virtue. They believe that by suppressing their anger, envy, or desire, they are becoming good. But repression is not morality. It is cowardice disguised as virtue. What is hidden is not gone, and what is denied does not dissolve. It waits, it lingers, and when it returns, it does so with a vengeance, disrupting life in ways that seem inexplicable. That sudden outburst, that reckless decision, that destructive impulse you swear was not like you, that is your shadow breaking free from its prison. To ignore your shadow is to surrender your life to forces beyond your control. To confront it is to reclaim your power and to finally live as a whole being, not a fractured one. The choice is not between shadow and light. The choice is whether to live in blindness or awareness. The shadow, when unacknowledged, often seeks expression through projection. Instead of owning what is dark, uncomfortable, or unacceptable within yourself, you cast it onto others, believing that they embody the very qualities you refuse to recognize in yourself. This is why you so easily despise in others what you secretly carry within. The man who cannot bear his own cowardice becomes merciless in condemning the weakness of others. The woman who cannot face her envy becomes consumed with criticizing those she perceives as arrogant or vain. In truth, these reactions are less about the external world and more about the inner reality you refuse to confront. Projection is the shadow's camouflage, its way of expressing itself without detection, and unless you understand this mechanism, you will live your life in constant conflict with others, blind to the fact that the enemy you fight outside is the reflection of the one within. This is why so many relationships collapse under the weight of misunderstanding. People do not meet each other as they truly are. They meet through the haze of projections. Lovers believe they see the perfect partner, only to later be shocked when flaws emerge. Enemies are demonized beyond proportion, as though their existence explains all personal suffering. The truth is that much of what you love and hate in others is a mirror of what you repress in yourself. You believe you are judging them, but unconsciously you are revealing what you fear or deny within your own soul. To break free from projection requires radical honesty, the courage to ask, "What does this reaction say about me?" If someone provokes in you a burning hatred, you must ask whether they truly deserve the intensity of your response, or whether they have simply awakened something dormant within you. Often, the hostility is disproportionate because it is not directed solely at the other. It is fueled by the energy of repressed traits you refuse to own. The anger you hurl outward is, in fact, the anger you cannot face inward. The danger of living in projection is that it blinds you to reality. You do not see others clearly, nor do you see yourself. You live in illusions, misjudging people, misinterpreting situations, and condemning qualities in others that are secretly your own. This is why Jung insisted that self-knowledge is not simply about light and clarity, but about owning the darkness, about withdrawing your projections and facing the truth of what you are. To project is to scatter fragments of yourself across the world, to live in constant battle with shadows of your own making. To integrate is to gather those fragments back, to reclaim what was disowned, and to finally recognize that what you condemned in others was a reflection of your own depths. Only then can you meet others as they truly are, without distortion, without illusion, and without the shadow's deception. When you refuse to face your shadow, it begins to rule you in silence, not as a conscious choice, but as an unconscious compulsion. What you deny in yourself does not vanish. It simply hides beneath the surface, and influences your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in ways you cannot see. This is why you find yourself repeating the same destructive patterns, choosing the same toxic relationships, sabotaging your own progress, or exploding in anger at the slightest provocation. You think these events are coincidences, or that the world conspires against you, but in truth it is your shadow guiding you from the dark, pulling the strings without your awareness. Jung described this as fate, the external world seeming to conspire against you when, in reality, it is your own unconscious leading you into the same traps again and again until you finally awaken to it. The shadow thrives in secrecy. It manifests as addictions you cannot control, as lies you tell yourself to maintain your image, as fears that paralyze you, or as compulsions you cannot resist. Every time you push it away, it gains more power. Every time you deny it, it sharpens its claws. What you will not face consciously returns unconsciously in your daily life, often at the worst possible moments. This is why people who appear outwardly moral and righteous sometimes harbor the darkest impulses, and why those who claim to be free often remain prisoners of unseen forces within. The shadow will not allow itself to be ignored forever. It insists on expression, whether through sickness, destructive choices, or outbursts that shock even you. To live under the rule of an unacknowledged shadow is to live as a slave. You may believe you are free because you make decisions and build plans, but if those decisions are shaped by fears you refuse to name or by desires you dare not admit, then you are not the master of your life. The shadow dictates your actions from behind the veil, and you dance to its rhythm without realizing it. This is why Jung insisted that freedom is not achieved by pretending to be purely good, but by becoming whole. Wholeness means including the darkness, recognizing it, and integrating it, so that you act with awareness instead of compulsion. If you continue to deny the shadow, it will destroy you slowly. It will erode your relationships, because you will project your own flaws onto others and punish them for qualities you secretly hold. It will poison your ambitions, because you will chase goals that serve your unconscious desires rather than your true self. It will rob you of peace, because the battle between what you show and what you hide will tear you apart from within. The only way to break free is to turn inward, to face the darkness honestly, and to recognize that what you fear most in yourself is not meant to be your master but your teacher. The shadow does not only destroy from within, it also shapes how you interact with the world, particularly in the form of projection. What you refuse to acknowledge in yourself, you will inevitably see in others, often with exaggerated intensity. You criticize, judge, or even despise traits in others that are secretly alive in your own psyche, yet too painful for you to accept. For example, the person who condemns arrogance may themselves harbor a suppressed hunger for dominance, while the one who shames others for weakness may carry an unbearable fear of their own vulnerability. This projection allows you to temporarily avoid confronting your darkness by displacing it onto those around you, but in doing so, it distorts your relationships and fills your world with enemies that are, in truth, reflections of yourself. This is why unresolved shadows create cycles of conflict, mistrust, and alienation. You cannot see people as they truly are. You only see them through the distorted lens of your unconscious. Every unresolved piece of yourself becomes a filter through which you perceive reality. The shadow makes it almost impossible to build authentic connections, because your interactions are poisoned by hidden motives, unspoken fears, and accusations that spring not from truth, but from your own inner denial. You may think others are deceiving you, betraying you, or undermining you, when in fact it is your unacknowledged shadow pulling you into paranoia and suspicion. The danger here is not only relational, it is spiritual. By projecting the shadow outward, you avoid responsibility for your inner life and therefore forfeit the possibility of growth. You live in a state of blindness, convinced that the problem lies everywhere but within. This blindness makes you brittle, easily offended, quick to anger, and always in search of scapegoats. You become entangled in endless battles with shadows outside yourself, forgetting that the true battle lies within. Jung warned that until the shadow is integrated, it will appear in your life in the form of fate. The very people you despise will reappear in different faces. The same situations will repeat under different disguises, and the world will seem to conspire to test you in precisely the areas you refuse to acknowledge. Life itself becomes your mirror, reflecting back to you the very qualities you attempt to suppress. To deny the shadow is not to escape it, but to ensure that it governs your life from behind the scenes, appearing in ways you cannot control. The path forward is not to eliminate projection entirely, for it is a natural mechanism of the psyche, but to recognize it when it occurs and to use it as a clue. Every time you feel an unusually strong emotional reaction to another person, ask yourself, what is this really revealing about me? The shadow does not disappear by being denied. It dissolves only when you summon the courage to recognize its face in your own reflection. The final danger of ignoring the shadow is the slow death of the soul, the quiet suffocation of your true self under layers of denial and repression. When you refuse to acknowledge your darkness, you do not merely avoid discomfort, you also amputate vast parts of your vitality, creativity, and depth. The shadow is not only destructive, it is also the reservoir of your instincts, your raw energy, and your untapped potential. To exile it is to exile yourself. You become half a person, fragmented, shallow, living on the surface while the depths of your being remain unexplored. You may appear outwardly good, respectable, or agreeable, but beneath that mask lies a silent void where your authenticity should dwell. This void is what Jung described as the greatest tragedy of modern life, the alienation of man from his own soul. When you deny your shadow, you lose the capacity for genuine individuality, because your personality is not whole but constructed, fragile, and dependent on others' approval. Your choices are driven not by inner strength but by fear. Fear of disapproval, fear of conflict, fear of who you might become if you face the truth of your own darkness. This fear enslaves you. Instead of becoming a creator of your destiny, you become a prisoner of roles and masks, trapped in the endless repetition of shallow patterns. The ignored shadow also manifests in spiritual stagnation. Without shadow work, any pursuit of enlightenment, morality, or self-improvement becomes hollow, built upon repression rather than integration. The more you try to ascend into the light, the darker and heavier your shadow grows beneath you, dragging you down. This is why so many people who chase perfection collapse into despair or corruption. They attempt to escape their humanity instead of embracing it. Wholeness is never achieved by amputating parts of yourself, but by reconciling them, by holding both light and darkness within the same being. And so, ignoring your shadow leads not only to neurosis, projection, and conflict, it leads to a wasted life, a life where the deepest truths of your nature never find expression, where your unique strength never awakens, and where your soul remains hidden from itself. To face the shadow is terrifying, but to refuse is far worse. The shadow does not vanish when ignored, it festers, and in time it consumes. The ultimate destruction it brings is not external chaos, but the quiet erosion of your essence until you no longer know who you are. Only those who dare to face their shadow can truly live. To embrace your darkness is to reclaim your wholeness, to awaken the fullness of your being, and to finally step into the dangerous but liberating territory of authenticity. The shadow is the doorway to the soul, and to turn away from it is to abandon yourself.